Finally, I've decided to tell how my life went downhill. Whatever you do, don't repeat my mistake. A helpline is a very, very strange thing. I would even say double-edged. After all, you never know who's on the other end of the line. And this applies to both sides. The person calling a helpline doesn't know who will answer the call, and the one answering won't know who called them or why. And you, yes you, reading these lines should think about it, as it's so similar to image boards. Some may think I'm sharing quite a lot of insider facts about such organizations, but I don't care anymore. I'm not going back to work there anyway, and you won't learn anything particularly secret. Besides, I don't have much time left, I suppose. But the details aren't a secret for anyone who has taken a special course in telephone counseling at the psychology faculty or worked as a volunteer at a helpline. It all started quite innocuously at first. 3 years ago, I graduated from the psychology faculty at one of the not-so-top universities in Default City. After getting my diploma, I first worked as a psychologist in a school, but quit after a year. The work was complex, nerve-wracking, and paid poorly. However, working with children is far from the worst thing about being a school psychologist. The principal drives you crazy. The staff is like a jar full of spiders, pulling you in various directions unrelated to your actual work. Yes, and developmental psychology and psychodiagnostics were never my strong suit, but I had to gain some experience somewhere. Without it, no one would hire me. And then I just got tired of it. I left that madhouse of my own free will, went freelance, and enjoyed life. I made ends meet however I could. I had to work a lot. Mostly everything went to pay the rent, but I was doing things that interested me. There was just one thing that didn't quite fit. I could easily do all this without a psychology degree. I wanted to believe that 5 years of studying wasn't for nothing. In the end, I decided to work at a telephone counseling service. The schedule was flexible. I could be busy with my own thing, and I could gain experience. They paid, though even less than at school, but with all my other income, an extra $8,000 a month wouldn't hurt. By the way, the job wasn't the most difficult, at least no more difficult than working in tech support. There are rules that must be followed, and a number of specific restrictions, and the rest is either not in your competence or comes with experience. I was supervised by a supervisor for the first month. Then they were convinced that I was suitable for telephone counseling in every parameter. I enjoyed the job. Sometimes I even noted some amusing distant resemblance to image boards. I'm anonymous. The people calling me are anonymous. Our own rules of communication, our own laws, our separate world, practically. Just a little more kindness, though trolling does pop up unexpectedly. Would you seek advice from Crisis Hotline Anon? I mostly worked the night shift on the phone, 2 or 3 days a week. Calls were rare, mostly from teenagers or lonely elderly people. There were a couple of prank calls, suicidal people, drug addicts, or women who couldn't think of anything smarter than calling a helpline while locked in a room as their drunk husband smashed the door with an axe. Didn't come across my line. I guess I was lucky, until the last time. I was bored throughout that shift. Nobody called until 3 in the morning. Now that's what should be called a deadline, I thought with a smirk, put the kettle on, decided to make coffee. And then the phone rang. I picked up the receiver and didn't have time to say anything. Be silent. I know who you are, a dry, rustling whisper, unclear if it's a man or a woman. I know everything about you, you can't escape. Just listen carefully. Here we go, I thought. Our regular client is finally calling. By the way, we affectionately called certain callers regulars or crazies. I don't know about other offices or departments, but we love them. And some particularly notorious ones were given party nicknames behind their backs, based on their discourse and peculiarities. Like Grandpa Tanker Poet or Silence on the Line, they were usually genuinely crazy, calling the helpline constantly, with different motives and frequencies, but fairly regularly. There was even a sort of initiation ritual. Once you got a call from your first regular client and didn't get flustered, you were accepted into the team. Welcome to the tech support for human souls, kid. and the voice continues. Listen, listen, whom I forgive. I forgive. I am your childhood fear. Your nightmare, whom I pity. I pity. I am what you run from but will find no salvation. Listen carefully. How to summon the one you didn't believe in. You can't escape now. How to believe in the one you never heard of. You hear how I ascend the steps. They follow you. Up the stairs. 1,000 nights I stretch my hands to the disobedient and stubborn people. But on the 1,000th I know your deeds. You bear a name as if alive, but you are dead. In such cases, it's better to listen than to try to respond aimlessly. Hope that the caller will vent or look for some clue to steer the conversation towards something constructive. Just take what you have. 25. Keep it until I come, and I will rule them with an iron scepter. 27. Like clay pots, they will be shattered, as I have received power from my Father. I know who you are. As words began to mingle with a noise resembling radio interference, I soon realized I couldn't distinguish what was being said on the phone. The whisper became faster, then turned into a piercing whistle. I couldn't move, just sat there, gripping the phone receiver and listening to something utterly strange emanating from it. Sharp, jerky cries, howling, heavy, crescendoing drumming, and ear-piercing scraping, like a sharpened steel rod being forcefully dragged across a sheet of iron. I started feeling sick. My head spinning, I blinked and couldn't open my eyes anymore. You, bear, a name, a desperate, hoarse cry tore through the deafening roar. As if, you, hear how they believe. 1,000 nights and 1,000 years. Suddenly everything fell silent, as if the sound had been cut off. I opened my eyes. I'm sitting in the corner, hunched over, with the receiver in my hand, and a colleague from the next room is shaking me by the shoulder. His mouth opens and closes, explaining something to me. But all I hear are short beeps on the phone. It's only later that I realize what they're telling me. You fell asleep right at the end of your shift. Of course, I won't tell the boss, but at least get some sleep before work or switch to the day shift. Alex just came in. He gestures for me to sign off for the shift and go home. Take some rest. It happens, I mutter into space. Looks like one of the future regular callers rang me. Quite a trip, whether you stand or fall. One of the regulars? That's a tough case. He looks at me incredulously. Nobody called you at all. I thought you turned off the phone and crashed out. Popped in a couple of times, saw you were sitting there, waiting for a call, even checked the phone myself, and you answered, saying everything was fine. Then, at the end of the shift, I looked in and saw you sitting in the corner with the receiver off the hook. I stopped listening. I never thought professional burnout would come so quickly and with such consequences. Absent-mindedly thanked my colleague, downed the cold coffee in one gulp, signed off in the logbook, handed over to the next shift, and went home. The nightmare that had plagued my dreams wouldn't let go. How could I have blacked out like that? Well, at least it wasn't in the first week of work. I collapsed into bed as soon as I got home, fully clothed and dreamless. And in the evening, it all started again. I was awakened by the ringing of the telephone. Groggily, I crawled to the phone, glancing at the clock. 10 minutes to midnight. I must have slept quite a bit, and who could be calling so late? I shouldn't have answered. I know who you are. I know you, the familiar voice hissed. Hold on until I come. I know everything about you. You can't escape anymore. Just listen. Bloody hell. I slammed the receiver down with a crash, nervously looking around. Forgotten childhood memories flooded into my mind when the dark apartment turned into a strange and hostile world. I dashed to the switch and flicked on the light. The phone rang again, but this time I didn't pick up. I simply yanked out the cord. There's no need to describe the subsequent events in detail. The calls continued whenever I turned on the phone. Not always immediately, usually at different times, day or night. I never returned to work in the counseling service, claiming illness. Reporting to the police yielded nothing. The local officers started looking at me like I was crazy. At first, I moved in with a friend, but the calls persisted. They came when I was home alone, always the same hissing voice, reciting blatant delusions mixed with lines from the New Testament. For some reason, Revelations was his favorite. The last straw was when the calls started coming to my mobile. The number wasn't just unidentified, it wasn't even saved in my incoming calls. I was too scared to see a psychiatrist. I absolutely didn't want to get a diagnosis, though I understood I wouldn't return to a normal life. I couldn't take it anymore and ran. Sold some of the few things I had, gave away others to friends, told my parents there was an opportunity to work in another city with a good salary and easier housing. And I ran, taking only my laptop and a change of clothes. I hitchhiked across the country, staying with acquaintances in different cities. Wherever I went, I scraped by with odd jobs, sometimes staying longer, sometimes shorter, but never lingering too long. I was afraid it would find me. Finally, I settled somewhere in a country house with distant relatives, living in seclusion, desperately trying to pass for a normal person. I worked in a construction crew for a cousin's uncle, then as a cleaner at one of the local car factories, nothing fancy, but enough to eat. All this time, I panicked at the sight of a phone. I tried not to be alone with those damn devices, didn't use my mobile under various pretexts. Soon, things leveled out, and I gradually distanced myself from the events that had transpired. I started renting an apartment in the city. Fortunately, the landlords were tech-savvy, and I negotiated payments with them via Skype. Everything was fine until last night, when all communication channels were clogged with emails and messages from unknown addresses. The text was blatant nonsense, mentioning childhood nightmares, interspersed with passages from Revelations. I'm horrified, cowering in the corner of the kitchen, too scared to even touch the laptop. Everything seemed unreal, like a nightmarish dream. When the lights in the apartment went out, I thought it was all over. I wouldn't make it till morning. I was afraid even to move when someone pounded on the door. The neighbors wouldn't simultaneously knock on the door and sing lines from the apocalypse in a chorus. I woke up not long ago, curled up in the corner of the kitchen. I gathered my last strength, and now I'm typing this text on the laptop. Eventually, I've come back to where I started, an anonymous kind of helpline. I don't know what will happen to me. Right now, I'll send this text, finish my last cigarette, and walk out the door into the darkness of the stairwell. I don't want to do this, but damn it all, darkness awaits me.